Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised it has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello, this is GammaCast and I am Dave. Online I have got Charlie.
Hello.
Tonight we are going to be talking about Earthquakes Happen. It's episode 11 on season 1 of The Incredible Hulk. Originally aired May 19th, 1978. The synopsis on this one: David attempts to gain access to a sophisticated gamma radiation equipment at a nuclear power plant by impersonating a plant safety expert. Unfortunately, a massive earthquake occurs, causing a number of disasters which only the power of the Hulk can fix. Director of this one is Harvey S. Laidman. Writers Jim Tisdale, Migdia Chinia Varela, and the alias is that he was using during the episode is Dr. Robert Patterson. So this could be the first alias that didn't have the name David in it. And the location was San Thomas, California.
Mm-hmm. So let me take issues with those, because there's two items that just jump right out to me. It's not a nuclear power plant. It's a nuclear research facility with a nuclear reactor within it. So.
Oh, so my Wikipedia article is wrong, is what you're saying?
Yeah. They actually make that point, that it's not a nuclear power plant, that they have a reactor the same as many other essentially small-scale reactors that a lot of universities have.
Okay.
Secondly, it's not problems that only the power of the Hulk can fix. It's problems that David Banner causes that then the Hulk has to sort of fix, because, as they make the point that had David Banner not been there, the reactor wouldn't have turned on and we wouldn't have been in the dire straits that we were.
Well, I mean, we still had the earthquake. That was going to happen regardless.
Yes.
But as far as the disaster that was happening at the reactor, you're right.
All David's fault.
That's all David's fault, correct.
Okay.
So this one actually does use a lot of scenes from the movie Earthquake. So
yes. This was definitely a stock footage episode.
Yes.
And you can kind of see, and we were talking, I think it was last week, about with Never Give a Trick or an Even Break, how Steven Spielberg had gotten kind of upset about how all of his footage from some film had become stock footage for this item. And it's an interesting thing they're doing here for those budgetary concerns, is taking this old Universal stock footage and, just repurposing it to make their Hulk episodes, because you have all this B-roll of action adventure stuff, and you have an action adventure series. Might as well just write a story that fits into that. Interestingly enough, to that extent, it's kind of a testament to the quality of the production, that even though they are literally writing episodes for the footage they have, they're still making fairly decent episodes. I really liked this episode on a lot of levels, not the least of which is just how savvy and yet also kind of unconcerned David is becoming in his quest to cure himself of the Hulk. I really feel that there has been a great arc of character for David Banner from the first episode to where we are now, and a surprising amount of continuity of character, if not of story, as we go through everything, where we can see him becoming less trusting and more suspicious after the Models episode, and just sort of growing as a character to, at this point, where he is really actively be, and kind of a degradation of David Banner as a person, becoming actively endangering other people's lives in his
Yeah.
quest to himself of the Hulk.
Yeah, he's definitely getting himself more savvy with, I guess, what it's taking him to survive on the road, being on his
Exactly.
own. And you're right, the evolution of David Banner, whereas at the beginning of this, he was you're right, way more trusting and a bit, naive. But,
Hmm.
this, throughout the episodes, he's definitely gotten, a change of how he comes across, to the people he's interacting. So I definitely see that.
So within the concept of this episode, and this is kind of fun because we mentioned a couple episodes how Jack McGee seems to have that supernatural ability to just know where the story is, and sure enough, Jack McGee's here, but not chasing the Hulk this episode.
Right.
Did you think that was a convenience, or did you think that was actually kind of interesting to show that Jack McGee actually does do other beat work as a reporter outside of his Ahab-esque quest for the Hulk?
I thought that was a lot of fun. It was great to see, him working a different story, because I'd hate to think that he's just relying on the stories of chasing the Incredible Hulk to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I'm glad that there's other, activity that, he's getting, pushed into doing. And I don't know if he's, volunteering or being told to do, or, what the case is. And that I guess that's not important. It's good to show that there's other activity that he's involved in, other stories that he's pursuing for the National Register.
Now here's a question for you though. Okay, because it's an interesting thing to ask here. If Jack McGee is a good reporter, if he's following all of his leads, okay, he may be piecing together certain things. One, there is always a guy who's there at the same time as the Hulk that people always know have met this guy. They also notice that there's all these other interesting stories going on. For the first time when he meets this woman in this thing, they have the new unveiling of the new fancy radiation machine. When the Hulk shows up at the zoo, there's a doctor doing rage research. And when the Hulk shows up at the baby selling facility, there's a doctor there who happens to be tied to advanced genetic research. Is it possible that Jack McGee is thinking this is a very advanced radiological locale, a very advanced radiological scientific institute? This may be where the Hulk shows up next.
That's an excellent question.
Yes.
And is he following, the same news threads that David Banner may be following?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to determine his next move, and then Jack McGee's just getting savvy enough that he understands that that's going to be a possible next spot for the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. It is just very convenient that he's there, and so if you want to start to break it down, when we think that, he maybe even suspects that the Hulk may be David Banner, because he did speak with the Hulk about David Banner in the Las Vegas episode.
Right.
So that's an interesting question there.
And we were speculating on that, and on a previous episode where we were trying to figure out how Jack McGee just seems to be at the right place at the right time. So that is a great, that's a great process to think through of what you were just stating, was maybe that's how he's figuring out his next move, is realizing that something that's going to evolve, from that scientific research, which was around the same circumstances that first introduced him to the Hulk.
Exactly.
Maybe he's now starting to put that thread together, and he's just going to, follow along and, pay attention to the news stories and, for the scientific advancements.
Yeah, and of course, when the Hulk does show up here, I thought it was very interesting that immediately Jack starts talking about the Hulk, and then all of a sudden, all the other reporters no one wants to hear that fairy tale stuff, So it was interesting to me when Jack is that. Of course, Jack, like I said, almost as if Jack either was anticipating the Hulk showing up or what have you, even though. Obviously, the Hulk is still an issue that a lot of other reporters don't respect. Although, as I've said, the subtle implication of the entire Jack McGee storyline is that everything the Inquisitor or the Register publishes is true. That that Jack McGee is actually one of the world's greatest investigative reporters, and the world is far crazier than people want to admit, and that's why. He is at once ridiculed, but at the same time doing quite well because, of course, the Register is reporting this hard hitting journalism about big feet and Hulks and alien abductions, and the world doesn't want to admit that it's a world full of Hulks, but the fact that the Register exists and is willing to pay for Jack McGee to chase the Hulk tells you that, it's all true. And this is actually a really legitimate business model.
And to the point of what you're talking about, where the other reporter was giving him some static, I assume that it's like, the Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster to those guys. They're like, oh, here's that Jack McGee, and we're going to hear about, big green guys now. Ha 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 ha.
Yes.
So I'm assuming in his, circle of reporter contacts, that's what he's getting ridiculed for.
Yes, but of course, and like I said, but of course, what we know the truth of it is, and that people at the Register clearly know this is actually true, and that clearly the Register cares enough about it being true that they're not just going to make up Jack McGee's stories. That Jack McGee's still being a real reporter on this whole thing. So right. That's what's fascinating to me about the concept. I don't know if they ever thought about it that deeply. But it is an interesting suggestion. From our very first episode, I had said that the Hulk is very much the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That the ideas of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are very much here, and that is in fact a very deep idea in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially as it's expanded. This idea that the world has always been crazy, but that people have been shielded from this knowledge for a long time. But anyway, getting into this actual episode itself, it's a very interesting thing because this is, one of the first times where David is actively committing identity theft,
right?
To slip into the position of this safety inspector to try and get access to this plant.
And it was actually very funny when he was getting the fake credentials, and he was told by the lady, it's going to cost $75, but then she tries to upcharge him to $100, and then he plays along and says, okay, well, then I'll just find what I need somewhere else. So he calls her bluff, and then next thing you know, she's like, all right, you can get it for $75. But I just thought that was really funny how he's like, all right, well, I'm not going to be playing along with this. You're not going to fool. You're not going to, get me to pay an extra $25.
Yeah, well, and as we've said, he's getting way more savvy.
Right.
As the story goes on, he's much more comfortable in doing what he has to do to get to the next stage. It's an interesting evolution for David Banner. From mild-mannered scientist to, really, kind of his own anti-hero, where he is not above breaking the law to do what he needs to get done. So that's an interesting aspect. And speaking of breaking the law, there are so many laws broken in this episode. Aside from the identity theft, it's just really threatening the lives of every person in this city. Although again, this was a very fascinating thing to me. Again, when we get into this is, late 70s, early 80s era. Again, they have a dossier on the person that David Banner is impersonating, but they don't have a photograph.
Right.
And this was a whole issue a few episodes ago that there wasn't a photo. Nobody thought to just include a photograph with everything, which is, at once one of these things that's kind of makes sense in the real world. Although it's funny to me because you think about, if you ever see anything in show business related, which is what most of the writers would know about, there would always be a photograph. But here, there is not. I also like the fact that when the woman who's giving David the tour, and he's clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. He's clearly not a safety inspector, and she sees through him right away.
Right.
And I thought that was a great piece there.
Yeah, I did enjoy that, and yeah, I mean, it was obvious that he wasn't fooling her for one bit, and then that was the reason why she wanted to go get that dossier on the guy, because she kind of, she knew something was up, but she wanted to be able to have some way to prove it. And then, of course, when she leaves him alone, we got that really awesome shot of when he's sliding the broom into the door after it gotten popped open, because he's trying to get to the other level where the gamma lab is. But there was a shot where the camera rode along the broom when he slid it. So I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was just really cool. That was really cool. So
yeah,
but yeah, once he's done that, then she's going over there getting to the dossier. She realizes that the real doctor is supposed to have an artificial limb, and he walks with a limp and a cane, and so then she knows that's not the real doctor, or the real he was Dr. Patterson. And so PhD. Then and so she's planning to go back and confront him, and then at that point he's already made his way into the gamma lab and looking to irradiate himself again.
Right.
Yes.
And although one thing I wanted to say, speaking of some really great camera work, is that later when we get into the earthquake scenes and the cars driving and the helicopters flying, that was kind of such forced narrative when the helicopter is using the loudspeaker address system, which I don't even think is going to work very well on a highway.
Telling people where to go. No way.
That just seemed very like, oh boy, that was a scene that they're just trying, almost with it. We've got this footage, we got to use it. How can we do something narratively with this? So, but Banner turns on the machine and which causes the nuclear reactor to start up, which it wasn't supposed to, because they said they didn't want to use it until after the inspection. But and the whole of the problem then comes because Banner stuck his nose where it didn't belong.
Right. Right, and so he's getting ready to irradiate himself with gamma again in hopes that it's going to cure him. And then, she gets down there just in time, as I think the machine's got maybe 3 seconds left to fire on him. And then she goes in to confront him, and then we get the earthquake. And then the big computer thing falls on David, and then all of a sudden the gamma machine somehow turns itself into a laser, and because at that point she's got knocked out.
About that,
I don't understand that one.
Well, it had a laser and a gamma setting,
Turned phaser to stun, right?
Exactly. Pretty much. It's
And then the laser starts firing off, and it's getting closer to killing her. David, of course, sees this, but he's also being crushed by the computer. Then that's when we get our first Hulk out moment. gets himself out from underneath the computer, and then he rips the laser off the ceiling, saves her, takes her outside of the lab, and I think he kind of started transforming back when he touched her hand, if I remember right.
Yeah. Well, he peels open the steel door so they can get out.
That's right.
Yeah. But then he starts to transform, and of course and he also you get just enough security footage so that people see the Hulk, which triggers Jack McGee before the Hulk turns off the communications array. So that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because it was they had a closed circuit camera that they're able to watch the lab, and they saw the Hulk and trying to figure out what is this big green thing. That's right.
Yes, and of course then, so once he comes to, and this time he was smart enough to take off his shoes, so he puts his shoes back on, finds, I think it's just like a short lab coat thing that he just buttons up to be like a shirt, and then he's walking the woman out, and he meets the other people that were down there looking for him, and it has a very Poseidon adventure kind of vibe, where there's the one guy who's, it's all your fault, we're here, and the very negative guy, and the one injured person, the African American guy, and then who was the security guard, and then you have the boss who's trying to keep order, but and then they all try to find their way out. They realize they can go through the tunnel, the the power tunnels, and although there's like the concrete at the far end. And then they realize that the meltdown is occurring and that the cooling system isn't kicking in. And the only way to save themselves is to try and manually release the cooling flow.
Right, and then that's where we get the second Hulk out, because they're trying to turn that big wheel, and of course they're not able to, but there's too much steam going on, it's too hot, and of course that stresses out David. He hulks out. He's able to, get the wheel going, where, all of a sudden now, the cooling system goes into place. Yay, everybody's saved, and then he breaks the wall so he can get out.
Yes, and then he escapes.
Yeah.
And
then cue the Lonely Man theme.
Yeah, cue the Lonely Man theme.
But before that all happened, I mean, at the very end of it, though, I mean, before the Lonely Man theme, they have the moment in the ambulance where Jack McGee is asking them about the doctor, that helped them, and what happened down there.
Yeah.
Right.
And and because and again, this is where we're seeing that Jack McGee knows something. He can't quite. He doesn't have enough to declare something, because and as far as he knows, David Banner is dead. This could have been another scientist that was working with him that got exposed to it, and that's the thing of it, is he doesn't have a specific reason to think that David is the Hulk any more than any other scientist who could have been working at it, or some other patient of theirs, or something like that was the Hulk. But he knows. It's clear that he knows something is going on here, and that's one of the things I like about the Jack McGee character, is that when they do let Jack McGee have a solid episode, he actually does deliver very well.
He does.
He does deliver about why he is, why he is a very interesting character in the Hulk mythos.
I definitely agree, and I think Jack Colvin does an awesome job with him. And I mean, as far as like looking at this episode, I actually liked the use of their stock footage more during this episode than I did Give a Trucker an Even Break. But
really?
But as far as watchability and fun of the episode, I think I'd pick over the Trucker episode over this one.
Oh yeah. See, to me, the stock footage in the trucker episode, I didn't even notice it till you pointed it out. I mean, this one, I mean, clearly it's all. I mean, yes, it's all stock earthquake footage, and like I say, the whole public address system from the helicopter was just like, okay, everyone needs to evacuate. Okay, the problem has been solved. Everyone can go home. I'm in my car. I can't hear you. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
I've got the radio on too loud. Sorry. What was that again?
Yeah, it was an odd choice that they decided to do it via public address rather than say radio broadcast. But then they'd have had to show inside somebody listening to the radio to hear the evacuation orders. So
Right. And they didn't have that footage.
they didn't. Apparently not. So. But all in all, I thought it was a very solid episode. I liked. I liked the idea of, I liked on a lot of levels. I liked the idea of the Hulk being kind of the problem, and also being called out for being the problem. I've often made comment about, how Banner likes to stick his nose in other people's business, but it's rare that he gets called out on it. And this time he wasn't sticking his nose in other people's business. He was just mucking up their business by trying to do what he needed to get done. And yet he does get called out on it. He does get called out on what exactly were you doing here? And it's a very real possibility of sabotage in this. I mean, they're running a nuclear research facility in the late 70s. There were all kinds of eco-terrorist hippies out there at the time. It's not unprecedented that this guy might have been trying to cause an accident.
Right.
And they're forced to trust him. So it was very interesting.
And if I'm David Banner or I'm Jack McGee, well, I mean, Jack McGee wouldn't know, but let's say David Banner, I mean, throughout the different episodes, he's come within seconds of, something being able to happen, to potentially cure him. Jack McGee doesn't know this, but he's been within, just, near misses of being able to confront David Banner. I mean, and in this world, I mean, there are tons of these little near miss moments, and I mean, for David Banner, I don't even know how he get out of bed every day because of how it's like every time I'm about 3 seconds away, and then something happens.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the flip side to that is, it's not like he has cancer.
Well, this is true.
He has this theory, and honestly, and he's done some pretty radical stuff in this on a hunch that maybe this might do something, like the whole gene therapy thing in the Matrix episode. That was like, oh, okay, that's a long way from let's try and do an X-ray reversal.
Right.
That's like, could we cook some of my cells and inject them straight into my brain? Could that work? Maybe. We'll see. Let's find out. But that's comic book science for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you're not willing to test it on yourself, it's not worth doing the experiment.
So did you already cover your final thoughts? Was that kind of your wrap up of the episode?
I would say so. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, I mean, for me, the episode had, the stuff that I'm always looking for. Him trying to cure himself, Jack McGee, pretty predominant, bookended in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I like those aspects of it. The thing that I found hokey was the laser all of a sudden changing itself from, or change the gamma gun changing itself to a laser. And then I'm trying to remember why he would have thought to remove his shoes. But, outside of those little quirky little things, you had a really cool broom cam. I enjoyed the episode. I really did. I thought it was really good. I thought, even though there was stock footage, I think they used it well. Exactly to the points that you're making, we've got a David Banner that's just getting very savvy with trying to to get things to his own end, unfortunately at the cost of other people. And so it's interesting seeing that, that change of character throughout the season. So, so yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the episode.
Yeah, I actually totally liked him taking off his shoes, just for the record. I thought that was actually very practical because he does know that turning into a Hulk is a real possibility right now. So, he's about to expose himself to massive doses of radiation. A little bit of anticipation makes sense to me there. He doesn't take his whole shirt off, which would have been way more anticipation. But he's like, let me take off the shoes just in case. I've gone through enough shoes this episode.
It could have been a good Mr. Rogers episode. Maybe he was just putting on a sweater, a cardigan or something.
Yeah. Although I will say, man, this guy goes through so many shoes.
Oh, yeah.
But he always is so well dressed at the end. At the end, he's got his nice pea coat on. He's all set.
This is true. And come to think of it, he's never wearing the really nice pea coat, when he's about to Hulk out.
Yeah, well, he's planning ahead. He's got his good clothes stashed away. He said, okay, when it's time to run, I put on the good clothes. Now let's put on some polyester pants and, some cheap shirts that I can tear through because, quite frankly, I know I'm going to need to.
Yeah, I figure that in the next few moments I'm going to be getting into a fight, so I better have my polyester pants on.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so how do people find you on social media, Charlie?
Well, if you would like to tweet with me every Saturday night at 7 o'clock Eastern as I watch the episodes of The Incredible Hulk on MeTV, you can do so by following me on Twitter at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And I tweet a lot of other stuff too, so it's kind of fun to hang out with me sometimes. But if you like the Hulk, come watch it with me. And aside from that, if you'd like to write to me in the old-fashioned email way, just write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com.
Very cool. I'm Dave. I handle the 80s Reboot accounts on Tumblr. That's 80sreboot.tumblr.com. Facebook, we've got facebook.com/80sreboot. Twitter is @80sreboot. We're actually the home of #80sbattle. So if you ever get on there and like to have an 80s tweets that compare pop icons, check that out. If you want to email us, 80sreboot@gmail.com. And we also have a blog. That's southgatemediagroup.com/80sreboot. Also, very important for you, we want you to go out, give us a rating and review on iTunes. That's going to help other people find us, and we really appreciate it. So with that, we appreciate everyone hulking out with us, and have a wonderful night. Bye.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr @80sreboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.